Put your hands on top of your head.
Well, I didn't.
Now!
And I'll bet your mother had a loud bark.
Good morning. This is Morning Coffee with the Chief. I'm your host, Patrick Jordan, here on Pop Culture Minefield. You can find our show every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on Pop Culture Minefield YouTube. Now, if you go to YouTube, do me a favor, make sure you subscribe to the show, like the show, make a comment, and share with your friends. Now, if you don't like giving your money to YouTube and you're watching us on Rumble, on that platform, you have to follow us on Rumble, but you can like the show there, make a comment there, and share with a friend there. Now, we're really working hard to grow our subscription here on YouTube and in Rumble. Do me a favor, make sure you hit that bell and subscribe. It's really important for us. And the other thing is, if you like this show, I would like you to take some time to look at some of the other shows. Like yesterday's show was Military Monday, and they go over military shows. And I've watched a few of them. I like them, but now, of course, I'm an aficionado of military shows. I grew up watching them as a kid, as well as cop shows and cowboy shows. So always some great material on Pop Culture Minefield, and you can catch it both on YouTube and Rumble. Now, before we get into our show, we're going to do the movie Death Wish 2, and I got some great guests coming on. But before we get into our show, I want to talk about the Los Angeles Mission. Now, the Los Angeles Mission services the homeless in downtown Los Angeles, basically Skid Row. It's been there for about 85 years. Go to losangelesmission.org and check them out. Now, they provide hundreds of thousands of meals every year. They provide some basic services for the homeless. And, and when the homeless are ready to get off the street, they have some programs that last 6 to 12 months to help reintegrate somebody who's ready for change to go back into society. And they embrace the concept of cognitive behavioral therapy programs. Now, that is the gold standard for helping somebody turn their life around. They believe in it. They implement that. I have some concerns with some of the other providers in the homeless community. And one of the reasons why I sit on the Los Angeles Mission.org on their board is because I believe in their mission. So do me a favor, go to losangelesmission.org, make a contribution today, and help your fellow man who is struggling. Now, today, normally I wear a nice collared shirt, but I got a shirt for Christmas for my wife. There it is. It's the thin blue line shirt. I used to have one, but I wore it so much I wore it out. I wanted a new one, and I wore it specifically for today because today is National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day, and I think we're got a logo up there. So I'm going to ask you, as you're doing your travels, and if you come in contact with the law enforcement officer, whether it's positive or negative, they're getting a ticket or not, say thank you, because the men and women in law enforcement have been doing a tough job for a long time, and particularly over the last 10 years, they've been doing the job as unsung heroes, facing unrelenting attacks on their credibility and their character, and they still keep showing up to work. Now, when I retired a couple years ago, I would go to the stations, I'd talk to the communities, and they loved us. They loved us there. So it really is a very small group of people that are driving the narrative, and many of the leftist politicians are going along with them. And the best way that you can help make a police officer feel good is just to say thank you for what they do. So our movie today is Death Wish 2, and I got two great guests that are coming on. Now they did Magnum Force Sudden Impact with me, I guess a couple months ago, and one of them is it's Kevyn Major Howard. He was an actor in that movie, And he's an actor in this movie, Death Wish 2. And so I really wanted to do it because I wanted to bring him back. And his friend, now I met Kevin through a retired deputy sheriff that I worked with. In fact, I think his first patrol ride was with me. He reminded me of it, but it's one of those things. For me, it was a Friday night. For him, it was his first night in a patrol car. But let's bring on Deputy Mike Ascolese. Hey, Mike. Mike worked for a long time for the LA County Sheriff's Department, 30 plus years. He worked with me at West Hollywood. I think his first night in a patrol car was with me. We worked for many years together at West Hollywood, which was, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. We both probably have a lot of interesting stories that are not fit for this channel, at least not this show. I think some of the other shows might get a little bit out there, but we don't do that here on Morning Coffee with the Chief. I try to keep it, PG, right? Parental guidance. It's within that range, right? So I want the kids to be able to watch my show. Hey, Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing fine, sir. Yeah, 35 years with the Sheriff's Department. And yes, you were my first training officer. You were filling in for my regular one that night. And it was a hell of a night. We got some good stuff, and you handled it like it was, like you said, like it was a Friday night. But it was eye-opening for me on my first day.
Well, it gave you the bug too, right? You go, okay, I'm going to like this, right? And because I think one of the things I wanted to go to school and then go to law school, and then I started doing the work, and I go, I kind of like this. It's kind of fun catching the bad guys, right? And there were a lot of tactics and teamwork and camaraderie, but also it was a cat and mouse game when you chase the bad guys, right?
It was always fun. Miss it. I do miss it. I miss the camaraderie more than anything, but I do miss chasing the bad guy.
And it's one of the reasons why I like doing this show. I get to connect with former cops. Like I had the last show I had when I did Death Wish, I did John Bayless and Matt Rodriguez, and we had a lot of fun, right? And they recognized your name. They remembered, or at least Johnny Bayless did, because him. So, but hey, let's bring on our second guest. Now, he's a friend of Mike's, and I think he's become the friend of the show too. And it's the actor and character actor and Kevyn Major Howard. Hey,
good morning.
Good morning. How are you? Now, I do need to point out he did play in Full Metal Jacket as Rafter Man, and he's been a strong supporter of the military and law enforcement for several decades. It's probably why the friendship between you and Mike blossomed, because you were open to a friendship like that, which is why we have Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. It's your chance to meet a cop, talk to a cop, and figure out that the negative narrative against law enforcement is a lie. But I wanted to bring you back. I mean, we had to have your second death scene,
Right.
So, and we'll see that in a little bit. But hey, let's bring up the role on Kevin. Kevin, I think Martine, you had a role you wanted to show of him. Martine, did we lose you?
Ain't she sweet? So you're walking down the street. Now I ask you very confidentially, ain't she sweet?
You know what really pisses me off about these people?
What?
We're supposed to be helping them, and they shit all over us every chance they get.
You keep saying you got something for me, something you call love. But
I'm real glad Jenny's okay. I can't believe you guys came back for me.
You've been a messin' where you shouldn't have been a messin', and now someone else is getting all your best.
Hey, Matt, which in? False arrest. Yeah, me
These
too.
boots are made for walking, and that's just what they'll do.
What difference does it make to you?
One of these days, these boots are gonna
Jay, where's my
walk
granddaughter?
all over you.
You slimy bastard.
Well, it depends on the situation. I mean, I'm here to take combat photos. But if the shit gets too thick, I mean, I'll go to the rifle.
You keep lying when you ought to be truthin',
Hey, Callahan,
and you keep losing when you ought to not
don't look so
bet.
puked out. Better luck next time, fool.
You keep saying when you ought to be a-changin'. Now what's right is right, but you ain't been right yet. These boots are made for walking, and that's just what they'll do. One of these days, these boots are gonna walk all over you.
You beat her face to a pulp. You broke her body down to nothing at all, and then you threw her in an alley to left her to die. And I'm gonna do the same thing to you.
You keep playing where you shouldn't be playing. And you keep thinking that you'll never get burned.
Some security.
Ha!
The kid got away from you. Went to a damn disco.
That's enough, babe.
I want to get out to the kid. I want to get some trigger time.
What he knows you ain't had time to learn.
But you should have gotten out of here.
These boots are
Now let them
made
come
for
back for me.
walking,
We stand for truth,
and that's
justice,
just what
and the American
they'll
way.
do. One of these days, these boots are gonna walk all over you.
Punk. To me, you're nothing but dog shit, you understand? A lot of things can happen to dog shit.
Are you ready, Boots? Start walking.
You believe in Jesus? Yes, I do. Well, you're gonna meet him.
That was very good. Thank you, Martine, and thank you for Pop Culture Minefield for putting that together. Fantastic intro to a great character actor, Kevyn Major Howard. Kevin,
No. We only played. We didn't
only played it. Where'd you steal it from then?
It wasn't still.
Oh,
it was provided to us.
Provided by provided by you, Kevin?
I think Stephen Rigg from England put it together for a new documentary we're doing. And so thank you, Stephen Rigg.
Well, I love the music.
Yeah, it was well done. It was very well done.
Yeah, I love
nice to see a little bit of my history summed up in quite that fashion. And yeah, I'm very blessed. I'll say that. And back to National Appreciation Law Enforcement Day, I want to share with you all, I have a dog tag here, wears the same insignia that your shirt does. It's the Thin Blue Line dog tag.
Awesome.
And I want to reach out, and it was sent to me by Colonel David Dodd from the U.S. Army, retired, Point 27. If you want to reach out and grab some of these beautiful dog tags and give them give them out, and let's show appreciation for our heroes.
Yeah, one of the things I haven't done, and I'm going to start doing it on this show, and I'd love to have you on my other show, Kevin, too, where we can talk about your organization. My other show, I do politics, public policy, and just what's in the news, current events, and whatever else the chief wants to talk about. It's called Briefing with the Chief.
All right, all right.
And I'll bring you on for a promo for your organization.
Thank you.
And
I want to give a shout out to Deputy Mike Ascolese, one of my most favorite people of all time in life. Deputy Mike Ascolese, how are you this morning, sir?
I'm doing fine, Kevin. I love you too, man. You've been a great guy all these years.
Well, thank you, and right back at you, brother.
Well, I did want to point out that, although I love Mike, he's a bit of a slow learner. He moved to where there's snow, and so he has to shovel snow. And I mean, I understand his need to be a California refugee and leave the state. I guess I understand that, but you can go to a place where they don't have snow, Mike. But
there was only one problem. There was only one problem this morning. I couldn't get the motorcycle going in the snow, so I had to go get my truck.
Yeah. A lot of my friends are moving to God's country, and God's country has a lot of snow. And I grew up where there was a lot of snow, and I have no desire to move back to that. I don't want to drive in it. I don't want to shovel it. I don't want to clean off cars. I used to have to go out and jump batteries. I had 5 sisters, so I was the one who had to jump the batteries on the cars when it got so cold that. And those are horrible memories for me, as far as I'm concerned. I love the weather in Southern California. I did an interview yesterday with a guy from Chicago, and it's going to air tomorrow. And he's talked about the negative politics in Chicago, and I talked about all the restaurants I went to Chicago that were fantastic restaurants. And I said, listen, people keep coming to your city for the food. They keep coming to LA for the weather, right? So no matter what the politics are, they still have some positive stuff. But Kevin, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Doing very, very good. Thank you for asking.
So how are your endeavors going? I know you were working on a couple of different endeavors when we last talked.
We got some great news a couple of days ago. We have now gotten a production house. We are in work post production. To say it easily is, yes, Range Time with Rafterman was picked up as a pilot, so we will be filming that pilot, and the documentary of Full Metal Jacket was also picked up. So we're very, very excited. Just thanks for asking. Yeah, it's going to be a good show. It's going to be a very good show.
Well, whenever you want to plug it, either on this show or my other show, just let me know, and we'll get you on. We'll talk about it. And because, both shows are really to call out the sacrifice of the men and women of law enforcement. My other show, I unapologetically say this show supports law enforcement. If you expect me to genuflect to the left and talk about the failings of law enforcement, that's not what I'm about. There's other media outlets that do that every day. You don't need another one. I want to talk about the positive aspects of law enforcement, and when appropriate, the positive aspects of our military, because I think that they at times get a bad rap, or we don't appreciate all the good things that they do. So thank you for updating us, Mike.
Yeah. There's one thing with Kevin, with his group Fueled by the Fallen, the 911 cars, 911 tribute cars, the 5 Camaros, he just had them all completely redone. They've all had a brand new life breathed into them, and they're absolutely fantastic and gorgeous.
Yeah, they are very, very stunning. We actually won the SEMA Award for Best Design. 5 Camaros telling the story of 9/11. Each car is different from the next graphically. 5 talented artists from around America got together as their gift back to those heroes that paid the ultimate sacrifice. They wanted to jump in and tell the story themselves on a car. So we had just gotten the cover of a magazine, rapfam.com. You can check it out. Beautiful 8-page story feature on the cars. And they truly are amazing. I know I drive one right now daily. It's the First Responders, in fact. And she's a stunning, stunning vehicle. When I pull up to law enforcement, they look at it, and all of a sudden you see the tears in their eyes begin to catch. And a couple of hugs are shared, and we get that privilege to say to our community at large, our heroes in uniform are that worth it, that we've taken the time to build these beautiful, beautiful cars. And we're hoping to have conversations with the MGM properties here in Las Vegas, that you can stop by as a tourist and you can touch these cars in person. They carry the names of everyone lost in 9/11. So thank you, Mike, for bringing that up.
So SEMA, is that an acronym?
It might be, but I don't know. Mike,
don't know what it is. Is it SEMA?
Yeah, it is.
SEMA. Yeah.
Okay.
It's where they bring all the new cars out, all the concept cars. It's all done. I think it's all done in Vegas.
Are these vintage Camaros, or are they?
They are 2011 Camaros, and they're outfitted with light bars and push guards. And I call them the red, white, and blue lights of freedom when we run our light bars, whether that's during a parade, whether it's to escort some of our heroes down, end of watch. We ride with spectacular vision.
So I see you got Twitter, Fuel for the Fallen. So if you go to your Twitter page, Fuel for the Fallen, you can find the pics for the cars, I imagine.
And you can go ahead, Mike.
For SEMA, it's Speed Equipment Manufacturing Association.
There we go. Thank you.
Yeah. And if you can't find them there, go to Rafterman_official on Instagram, and you'll see the cars beautifully displayed here in Vegas at a couple of events already. So thank you again for bringing it up.
And you're both involved in that organization. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Well, you know
I'm
what?
a minion.
You're a minion. Well, what I will do is I'll send out some potential dates, and then you just pick the dates that work for you. And if you need a pre-record, we can do a pre-record interview too as well. And then I'll invite you both on, and we'll just do a little panel thing and talk about the organization and what you're doing to help the men and women in law enforcement, and the men and women in military. You're involved with helping them out as well, right? So, Well, again, thank you for coming back. Like I said, I needed to see your second death scene, and one of the things I noticed when I watched this movie, and I'm a fan of Charles Bronson. I really like Charles Bronson, and I think he's old Hollywood, classic Hollywood. And I mean, as I watched your clip too, you were also with you also worked with George Papard, who I really liked him too. Do you remember the movie? I think it was Blue Max, where he played a German flyer, and he was kind of the star, the stud, but he was also sleeping with the general's wife, and they put him in. Anyways, it was he played this German. Mike's shaking his head. Do you remember the movie, Mike?
No, I was just thinking he was sleeping with the wrong person's wife.
Well, yeah, they put him in a concept plane, and he ended up dying. But he was great in that movie. He was great in A Breakfast at Tiffany's. George Papard. He was great in the Sam Shepard story. Just a fantastic actor, and you got a chance to work with him, but you also got a chance to work with, Clint Eastwood, Charles Bronson, and of course Frank Sinatra, who did a lot of movies, but wasn't his thing was mostly singing, but these are all great legendary Hollywood, golden Hollywood type folks, and you got a chance to work with all of them. That's I don't know. Must have been an experience.
I said at the very top of our conversation that I am very, very blessed. And when I look back over my career and I see these important, iconic film people themselves that I'm sharing the screen with, I look back and I think of how blessed my life really has been. I'm one of the lucky few, I suppose, that share the screen time with those people. And thank my lucky stars.
One of my favorite actors when I was growing up was a guy named Cary Grant. Now, I don't know if you used to watch his stuff.
I love Cary.
Yeah, and I was I was working the Academy Awards party at Spago's, and he showed up. Now he was older, and I forget the name. Swifty Lazar, I think, used to throw those parties at Spago's with the Wolfgang Puck as the chef. It was the original Spago's right there. What's the cross street, Mike? It's Sunset
and Horn and Sunset.
Horn and Sunset. Okay.
Right across from Tower Records.
And I'm on the street keeping the paparazzis and the crowds at bay, and every now and then somebody's got to squeak through. And he showed up in a green Volvo. I remember it because I was like, wow, and I got to see him, and he's in the back seat. He was definitely older, had some glasses on and everything, but I was so excited. I mean, I remember him from the movie Gunga Din, and just so many different movies that he was in that I really liked him as an actor. I also got a chance to meet doing the same thing a few years later, Paul Newman. He stops in the middle of Sunset, gets out of the car. Somebody's driving. He gets out of the car. He goes, I need to get up to that restaurant. Can you get me up there? I said, yeah, I can get you up there. And so the crowd was really nice. They parted, and I got a chance to get him up there. But obviously I never really worked with these guys, but I did get a chance to see him, and it was so exciting. I think this show's I think Pop Culture Minefield is going to do some kind of tribute to Cary Grant come down. So I have to ask you, when you were growing up, who was your favorite actor or actress for that matter?
There's three people that I'll mention. One would be Steve McQueen, top of my list.
Huh?
Love that guy's intensity on screen, his ability, and he was Mr. Cool. He still is.
Yeah, of course. The Bullet, Sand Pebbles. Yes.
Yeah. Paul Newman, my second.
There we go.
And it's funny, I introduced my wife last night to The Sting with Robert Redford and Robert Shaw. One of the great moments in film with Paul Newman. And my third would have to be The Lion in Winter, Peter O'Toole.
Oh, yes.
I've seen that film 50 plus times. What a cast.
Yes.
Anthony Hopkins, you got Katharine Hepburn, Timothy Dalton. Truly one of the most amazing actors of our time.
Who played his wife in that show? I mean, they were all kind of
Katharine Hepburn.
Catherine, and I remember the movie. They were all kind of ensconced in her castle,
Yes,
and he came to check out what was going on with his wife and his three sons, and there was this competition about who would rise up and replace dad, and it was The Lion in Winter. Fantastic movie. All right, Mike, we got the actors' opinion of favorite actor. What's your favorite actor besides, of course, Kevyn Major Howard? Who when you were a kid, who were your favorite actors?
Well, when I was a kid, it was Robert Conrad, right? The Wild Wild West. That was really cool. But I go back. I really enjoyed Marlon Brando. I thought he was fantastic. I like Henry Fonda. So the older movies I enjoyed a lot more. Humphrey Bogart, but he couldn't beat Special Agent James West.
Yeah. Well, he was also in Baba Black Sheep, right?
Yes, he was.
Robert Conrad. Hey, let's bring that back up, Martine. So we got Cary Grant's birthday special is on January 18th here on YouTube. Pop Culture Minefield on YouTube. So check in for that. I might actually check in for that, Martine, if I'm available, because I just loved him. And there's so many movies. I have to go back and think of the movies, but I used to watch them.
The Bishop's Wife.
The Bishop. Oh. The one for me though, he was in a Hitchcock movie too, and I'm trying to think of which Hitchcock. North by Northwest. But for me, Gunga Din, because it also had Victor McLaughlin in that, Gunga Din, and I think it was oh my God, was it? It was one other legendary actor's name who was that. They were a trio of British soldiers who were captured by the Mahdi's soldiers in Sudan. The other thing is, I'm a history buff too, so I link these movies with the history that was going on or that they're trying to portray. It makes it very interesting. All right, gentlemen, I guess we got to get to work and review this show called Death Wish 2. Now, Death Wish 2 was it's obviously the sequel to Death Wish 1, and now Death Wish 1 was in New York, and at the end of Death Wish 1, Charles Bronson or Paul Kersey ends up in Chicago, and you kind of think that there's going to be a sequel coming, and you kind of think it's going to be in Chicago. But this, they must have been delayed on the sequels because they ended up, and they must have got a better production deal in L.A. because they ended up doing Death Wish 2 in L.A. was probably cheaper than going to Chicago. That's my very cynical viewpoint of this, Kevin. And it was released in 1992, so it was actually, I think, 8 years later than the original. And it's a vigilante action thriller movie, and was directed and co-edited by Michael Winner. Did you know Michael Winner at all, Kevin?
I didn't know him until I had met him, and he was a director that was he had a very he had a big reputation for not being liked very much by cast and crew. I learned that early, and I enjoyed working with him particularly though, but because I'll say it this way: when he cast me to play Stomper, he brought me into his office and he said, "Kevin, you can really run with the ball here. I will give you full license to come back with a character designed by you, but I want you to stretch it. I want you to go places with it." And he gave me that ability to use my imagination to play it out. And here I did, shaved the top of my head, left a braid down the crown, down the middle of my scalp, shaved my eyebrows completely off, and I based this character on two things. One was a snake, gave him that physicality to look like that snake. And second was, if Charles Manson had a son, what would he be about? And that's how I went about my research for that character. I ended up at that address, so famous for the killings of Sharon Tate, et cetera, et cetera. And I followed in those footsteps to a point that even law enforcement was going to pull me to the side of the road for speeding through Beverly Hills. And I had this complete look. I had dyed my eyelashes blue black. And I looked over at this officer. He looked back at me. And I think he slowed down because I'd given him that look that you can pull me over all you want, but this may not end up being well for you for the end of the day. You may never go home for lunch ever again. And that's where we parted ways. So I did test my character out on city streets, even with the Hells Angel bikers. And there are many stories to tell.
Well, working adjacent to Beverly Hills for many years, I think they just kept cars right at the entrance to their city and pulled anybody over that looked suspicious, right? Yeah, I don't know, Mike. What do you think? That's
when I worked a traffic car, I used to work with them all the time. And you're right; they'd sit up on the border, and if you're driving a foreign-made little itty-bitty box car, you might get pulled over. But no, they were good guys, and it was a lot of fun to work with them.
I was working a stop sign, and I hated writing tickets, and it was adjacent to Beverly Hills, and some guy blows through a stop sign, and I pull him over. And now I got accused of a lot of things, and I'm sure Mike got accused of a lot of things. But this guy accused me of pulling him over because he was rich. And I go, I get it. You pulled me over because I'm black. You pulled me over because I'm Latino. You pulled me over because I'm a good-looking female. You pulled me. But rich was, now that was, I was like, well, at least you can pay the ticket, I guess. So I didn't feel bad, but hey, so let's roll the I should say, hey, we got a couple people that are in this movie also that I recognize the name Jill Ireland. I did not know that she was married to Charles Bronson. She's absolutely beautiful.
Yes.
And I love her. Obviously, you love her accent. That certainly adds to her mystique and her beauty. But she also suffered after this movie. She ended up getting cancer, which is the big C. I mean, it comes for everybody, right? These illnesses. So make sure you're going to the doctor, guys, and getting taken care of. There's so many folks that they think they're healthy. They don't go for their. Mike, do you get your annual physical? Yes, right.
Sure.
I'm calling you out, dude. Because guys don't. They don't get help. They don't get. They don't get their annual physical. And I have to commend somebody who was from my life in the past, pushed me to always go get checkups. And so I
watch MASH though.
Did you watch MASH? So
yeah.
The rubber chicken, right? It's the rubber chicken test. Is what Didn't they have a rubber chicken that they used in there? But Jill Ireland's here. But we have some. Obviously Kevin's in the show, but we also have one of the names I recognized was Lawrence Fishburne. He's in this movie as Cutter, and he went on to have a pretty illustrious career, right?
Oh, he did. And listen, to Lawrence Fishburne, if you're listening, thank you so much for the friendship over all the years and for the introduction to what filmmaking is about. Lawrence took me down to Compton in its heyday. Crips and Bloods were walking the streets, obviously, and Lawrence just said to everybody down there, he's my brother, he's with me. And business was taken care of. So thank you, Lawrence, for all of that.
Well, I did work the streets of Compton. We took over from their police department, and when we took over, I think it was 2000-ish, it was shootings every night. It was out of control. They were within the top 10 murders per 100,000 in the states, in the United States there when we took over, and we cut them in more than half, and so we saved lives. But it was definitely a pop in town there, jump in town in a negative way, I might add. Yep. But yeah, I like his characters. He plays a lot of great character, a lot of good good shows that he's on, and he's enjoyable. He's there's so many good actors that you can relate to, and like I don't know if you know John Williams. He was in Boardwalk Empire, and he was in Bird on the Wire. He just recently passed away, and it was terrible because he was chipping on heroin, but he ended up having fentanyl in there, and it killed him, which is the other thing. But we have another actor who passed away recently, and we ought to talk about him, and it's David Soul. Let's get a picture of David Soul up there. And he's with his partner. I think it's Paul Glazer, right? So David Soul,
Michael Glazer.
And I saw some pictures of David Soul in a wheelchair. So I don't know if he had some other medical issues, but here he is, Starsky and Hutch. Mike, what kind of cars? They're the car that Glazer drove there.
That was a Gran Torino.
Gran Torino.
They called it the striped tomato, but that was a Gran Torino, 74, I think.
Yeah. So good show, fun show. It was obviously just just entertainment. I wouldn't say it was high drama, but just entertainment. And it's too bad. Did you ever get a chance to work with David Soul, Kevin?
I did not, but I often got a lot of people walked up to me and got, you look like David Soul. Yeah. But I got to meet Mr. Glazer a few years back here in Las Vegas. We were doing some business together, and he was my all-time favorite on that show. Yeah. And so getting a chance to meet him later on was spectacular for me. But it is a great show, Starsky and Hutch. What a phenomenon that was, and we all enjoyed it, I'm sure.
My wife says that she watched it all through high school. She's listening upstairs, so I'm sure she had a crush on one or both of these guys. I don't know, but she liked she was the one that told me that David Soul had passed away, and I said, "Oh, I'll do a tribute." So, Mike, Starsky and Hutch, were you a fan?
Oh, absolutely. And there was a lot of fantastic guest stars that went on to become much bigger in the industry. Linda Carter comes to mind right away.
Yeah.
Kristen McNichol was on a few times. It was a great show. Had some fun stories to it. Huggy Bear was a great character. Even the captain, who looked like he was going to blow a blood vessel every show, was good. It was a lot of fun, and of course, there was a cool car, man.
It really was.
Your first night working for me, did it measure up to any of the Starsky episodes there? Was I as
no, not at all.
Bob Glazer? No. Okay. All right, hey, slap the chief down here a little bit.
Okay, I'm just jumping in to tell you, I bet you are an even-tempered dude. I'm just saying.
It's, as you remember, Kevin, this is the owner. He holds the patent to the channel here, I guess.
How are you, brother?
Yeah.
Hey, Kevin, how you doing, man? I just wanted to drop
good.
in and say hi to everybody and say hi to you. Hope you had a good New Year.
I did. And also to Dale Dye, just if you can, say hello.
Oh, I will.
Tell him I think of him often.
He got gnarly sick, but hopefully he's recovering.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm going to bounce out. I just want to say Starsky and Hutchman was my show as a kid. I love that show. When I went to Europe, I was in Spain, Malaga, and every day at 11 o'clock in the morning before siesta, there was an episode of Starsky and Hutch in Spanish, Espanol. And even though I didn't speak Spanish, I loved it.
Yeah, right.
Suelte la pistola.
Suelte la pistola. O cuchillo. Sí.
But anyway, have a great show, guys, and Happy New Year's. I'll see you guys later. I'll talk to you soon, Kevin.
All right, sir.
All right, bye, guys.
So we got a comment. Yeah, I watched Starsky and Hutch every week and saw them all. Yeah, it's a good show. It was just, I saw that you were also on your reel there. You were on Cagney and Lacey there. You did a guest appearance there as well. So, so you may actually know a lot of these folks. It's. Anyways, let's get back to the show. Otherwise, we could talk about your career for the next, hour and a half. Okay, so let's roll the first scene. And one of the things I want to talk about is this scene roll. So they actually filmed it in Los Angeles. My assumption is production costs were cheaper. That's why the sequel is in Los Angeles. And, I kind of noticed as I looked at all the scenes that they were all probably fairly geographically located near each other. So probably reduced the production costs. I don't know if you noticed that, Mike. And they set up this stuff where they talk about the violence is up. You hear a radio broadcast from KABC that violent crime is up, a fear of crime, and that kind of stuff. And so they're setting the tone. And if you got to think, this was released in, I think it was, did I say 84 or 82? I don't remember now.
82.
And so the crime rate, the murder rate in California in 1980 was 14.1 murders per 100,000. By 2014, we had it down to 4.4 murders. So law enforcement did its job. In 1993, it was out at 13.1 murders per 100,000. So, and in Los Angeles, you could tack 10 onto that, and you're talking somewhere probably around 23, 24, 25 murders per 100,000, which is fairly high. And so as one of the things I think about both Dirty Harry and Death Wish is because crime was so high, these movies resonated with people. I don't know if you guys feel that way. Kevin, what do you think?
It probably did resonate with a lot of people. I know it was on our minds. And I guess that fear factor is why you play out in your mind that there's probably more trouble than there actually is. It's the media feeding that culture. Oh, look at this beautiful little apartment that we did all that work in.
Yeah. Where was that at? Do you remember what?
It was below Olympic, and I want to say Hobart might have been the cross streets.
Okay.
But in that area, Miracle Mile, I guess, district.
Yeah.
And she was terrific. Silvana Gardino, was terrific to work with. We put her through an awful lot. The cast did. The men during the rapes. And I know that I've never seen the official film that they was edited for the European culture. Was never able to be played here, but I hear that the rape scenes were very raw and very explicit, and would not be shown here under the censor board. America was not allowed to see them. So.
Yeah, it was pretty. Well, as Martin said it beforehand, he says pretty graphic. Which was different a little bit from the first one. The first one, there was a lot of implied violence, and this one, it was much more graphic.
Yeah.
But Mike, same question to you. Do you think the movie captured the attention? They did make money on this movie. They made money on the first one, captured attention of the public because of the high crime and the fact that they just wanted something done about it, and so they embraced the concept of revenge in vigilantes.
Yeah, I do agree. Definitely, and also with the Eastwood movies with Dirty Harry, you wanted to stand up and take care of something. They took it to a degree we can't do, but it was enjoyable to watch, and you really got into the character. I mean, you really felt for Kersey, and I mean, the first time he loses his wife, the second movie he loses his daughter, and the housekeeper, and in such horrible fashion, and he did something about it. People are sitting on their hands, and that's got to be frustrating.
Yeah. Well, I can remember I actually hit the streets in '85, so it wasn't that long after that, and I was working on the sheriff's department in '83, where I did, went through the academy. So I was, my career started right around this time, and it was. When did you first work the streets, Mike? What year?
1987.
1987. So it was popping back then. It was very busy, and there was a lot of violence and a lot of drugs, as I remember. And we did have a ton of property crime. So we had a fair amount of hypes. We had a lot of hypes in Hollywood, heroin and methamphetamine. And I will say, Kevin, the bad guys here looked pretty clean.
Really?
In comparison to the real bad guys that I dealt
Wow.
with, just because a lot of them had track marks and they were on the streets a lot, and we'll get into the genre that was in that late '80s, the whole punk stuff here, and another scene that I just noticed and I had to comment on. But I just believe that these movies were pretty successful, and they continued doing one series after another, both Dirty Harry and Death Wish, just because people were frustrated with crime and they wanted something to be done with it. And if they can go and escape at a movie and watch a vigilante or an unorthodox cop like Dirty Harry taking care of business and taking care of the criminals, they appreciated it. They liked it. And so, so when they write a movie, so when they write a script, they want to capture into what is driving culture at the time, right, Kevin? I mean, have you written a script, or have you embraced?
I have not written a script, and certainly, movies are just a reflection of our sign of our times. They really are. Life imitates art, art imitates life, so to speak. And a lot of these movies were the feeling amongst the families at large that the bad guys were out of control. And I think a lot of this may have started in film with Martin Scorsese and Robert De Niro, The Mob. We had such a fascination to look into that world. And when we walked away from those theater moments, realizing the mob did exist, and we were fascinated by their stories, their storyline, who they were, how they acted, I think we were charged up as a society, and they cultivated that with the Clint Eastwood pictures, with the Charles Bronson pictures. It brings money into the theaters, and that's what it's all about. Bottom line is that ticket sold.
Well, I always believe, and Mike, you can certainly chip in on this, that it's I want to escape. And if I want to escape and feel like, we finally got that guy, or some military movie or some cowboy movie, it's for me it was a distraction from challenges of the day, or as a kid it just kept my attention. I had 5 sisters, no brothers, so I had to watch some macho stuff on TV. I had to get some testosterone somewhere. But was it escapism for you, Mike?
Yes. When we were younger, and even now, I'm a big Batman fan. There's one of your vigilantes that comes from the comics. With Eastwood, you had a cop being the vigilante, and with Bronson, you had Joe Citizen doing it, and he made his mistakes, here and there, and he learned from them. I mean, there was 5 of these movies, so it kept getting more and more. But he was the guy next door. He was, he tried to be as smart as he could about it, and it was very believable. But both characters, Dirty Harry also was very believable. But I like Bronson being a civilian.
Well, you can relate to the character. Let's go on to the clip Stomper and Friends, and I will say that architects usually are not the people who would be victims of crime. It's usually the people who are working in working class neighborhoods, people of color. They tend to deal with crime more so than anybody else. And here's our guest right here, and there's his look with the boots. Were those your boots, Kevin?
They were. And I wore one spur. So when I would walk through any establishment, people would look out the side of around the corner and they go, who's wearing a spur to begin with? And then they'd see this character walking through a Beverly Hills restaurant and go, oh my God, let's hide away. Nobody knew what was going to take place next. In fact, my dentist, who was the dentist for Seals and Croft, actually evacuated his staff completely when I was sitting in the waiting room for my appointment, not knowing what really was taking place with me. And when they all left, and then the dentist came out, Dr. Louisi, and he said to me, Kevin, everything okay? And I said, absolutely. And then I began to tell him that I had just been cast in a Charles Bronson Death Wish film. And then he invited his staff back and we all laughed. So
did you see the crime right here? So what you got is Bronson and Kevin have something in common. They both wore member-only jackets in their movies. Kevin wore it in Sudden Impact, and now Bronson's doing it.
Wow.
Well, will you admit to having one of those, Mike, or what? Did you have a
no. It only comes in Harley leather. That's it.
Oh, is that right? Okay. Yeah. Well, I think about this. So he gets mugged, and they get his wallet, which is what brings them to his house where the bad crime really occurs. It's interesting that he takes him on with a knife. I'd be probably going in the other direction if I wasn't armed. But one of the things I will say, Kevin, where I worked, Hollywood, I worked 11 years of my 38-year career in Hollywood. And in Hollywood, you always came across somebody who looked a little different, right? Like I saw your character and I go, okay, well, that's, I don't know if it preceded you, but it definitely happened afterwards, because we get these characters on TV and they influence how people dress, right?
No, they do. They do.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
it was interesting when the film was released. I remember getting a phone call one Saturday morning from a friend of mine who said, you've got to rush down the newspaper stand, pick up the LA Times. You're on the front cover of the calendar section. I went and did it, not believing it was really taking place. And then the byline was the new Screen Avenger of the 80s. He's blonde, blue-eyed, and a killer. And there was this beautiful picture of Stomper itself and a nice little picture of Charles Bronson, and then the story told. But yeah, it really, that particular character opened up a whole launching pad for a lot of new characters of that punk rock genre.
Yes.
So that was its first delivery on film, was that character Stomper. And yeah.
And so Mike, I want to ask this. So why did they go after Charles Bronson? Charles Bronson did not give the group wide berth. I mean, we saw all of them dressed there. Lawrence Fishburne was there, but they were all trying to look intimidating. And Bronson doesn't give them wide berth, and they take offense to that. I think that's why they targeted him, right?
They focused in on him as soon as he went to get his wallet out to get the ice cream. They were waiting to see somebody pull a wallet out, and Kevin happened to be the guy. Some people keep their money in their front pocket. Kevin was pulling a wallet out of his back pocket. And
not Kevin, Charles. Charles Bronson was. Paul Kersey. Kevin was the guy who was going to steal it from him.
Yeah, right.
One of the guys. So, we'll get you right, Mike. You're still on training. I just want to point that out. Okay, good read. I missed that. I appreciate my training. Got that right. And let's go on to the next scene. It's attack. I'm moving through these scenes because we spent a lot of time talking on the front end. I want to get caught up a little bit. And this is they get his wallet. They get Paul Kersey or Charles Bronson's wallet, and they decide there's Florence Fishburne. Yeah, it's interesting, the glasses, and I like the hat too. And they end up going. They find the house, and they're going to go and break into the house. Which for me, this one's hard to believe because it's like, well, why that house? I mean, we're talking about people usually are on coke and heroin, whatever. They're just going to go to the local house where you can get the most money from. But they decided to go. That's part of the plot, is to go to Paul Kersey's house. And here's our. I'm sorry, Kevin. What's this actress's name again?
Sylvia Guardino.
Sylvia Guardino.
Yes.
And she's the maid, and she gets brutally attacked by the group. And I looked at those levered windows, Mike. And
Yeah.
all I could think of is how many burg reports I took because of those stupid levered windows that are easily pulled out. The burglar can get in and ripping them off. And, they're old style windows that allow you to open up and get some air in, but they were perfect for burglars. I don't know if you noticed that, but I noticed that.
No, the first thing I always told victims, get some glue and glue the edges of the windows in. If you're not, can't afford to put a whole new window in there. And once they were glued in there, it was a lot better.
It was harder for them to get it. Yeah. They'd have to break the glass to get it instead of just sliding the slots out. Yeah. So, but anyways, what I did notice on this attack scene was Lawrence Fishburne. This is probably the first time I really knew who he was, and then his whole getup in this scene. And of course, they're terrorizing the lady here, and they're breaking in. They distract her. You're the distraction at the front door, and the rest of the guys, or a couple of the guys, go in the back door, right, Kevin?
Yep.
And these are hard to attack scenes like this are really well choreographed, right? So that we do the best we can to protect the modesty of the actress or the actor involved, right? Is that you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, that's what got so graphic was each one of us had our turn with her, and each one of us had gotten pretty exposed, and we exposed her, and there was no protection at that point. It was a free-for-all with this particular cast. And that's why I have a lot of affection for Sylvia, what we really put her through. And this was not normal filmmaking. This had gone a little beyond what was normal in what we had seen on screen in the past. The fact that we unnerved her. I'm not going to tell you, it's, you got 5 actors who are willing to go this far in their character work, and then you give them free license to do and perform a rape scene. There is a lot of tremendous insanity that goes down with it. There is you try to respect the fact that you have to protect each other, but still we're making film. I have a great deal of respect for her, and I've talked to her several times since then, and she's very appreciative of the fact that we, at least in the background, subliminally, we noticed that we were taking her to these lengths and that we were trying to protect her as much at the same time. Still giving the camera what the camera wanted to see.
Was there any commentary after the film came out regarding this scene in terms of this graphic nature?
Yeah, I had heard that when they had seen the original final cut here in America, that people literally got up and walked out of the theater. The censor board jumped in real hard and said, this will never be released here in America. It was released in Europe in its full,
as filmed, yeah.
Yeah, and I've never seen it myself, and I don't think I want to see it. It's too much to handle on the set when we were doing it, and seeing it visually, I think, would be a tremendous PTSD moment for us as well. Same way as the audiences reacted to it when they first shut it down here in America.
So Mike, when we talk about graphic sexual assaults and graphic crimes, these things do happen. I mean, this is what this is all about, and trying to show it in a film and on TV so that the audience understands truly what victims go through is really difficult. So, I mean, they're trying to thread the needle here, but these things do really happen in your experience as a police officer, right?
Yeah, back actually when I was on training and with Salcedo, I went to a rape call. It was a 4-year-old girl, and it was rough. And I got her to talk to me and to show me what happened with a pair of dolls. I never forgot it. I'll never forget her. It was really rough. We did solve it. It turned out to be a neighbor, but to see that, especially being as young as I was and something new on training, it was god awful. And the dirt that we walked through and stuff we did that we came out the other side still smiling is amazing. There's things that I just couldn't get rid of.
You have to watch my show on police suicides, my other show, and it talks about chronic post-traumatic stress and how most police officers suffer from it, and it affects us at a different level, but it's there. I mean, it's part of you. All these memories become part of you. You know, in the scene, Paul Kersey and his daughter come home, and he's attacked, and she is then kidnapped and ultimately abused as well. And it's one of the things I want to say is, you know, we do watch a lot of these movies, and you have one guy come in and he kicks six people's in the butts, like six people, and he's the hero. You know, that's not reality. You're going up against six guys. It doesn't matter who you are. You're probably going to lose. There's very few people who can stand up to that. Even some of the toughest guys, well-trained guys, you know, 5 or 6 guys are going to take you down, and that's just the reality. Now, in the scene, as the cops come, also we see. So we already know this is Paul Kersey from Death Wish. He killed a bunch of people in New York. Because the people who go to this movie relate back to the first movie, that he was the vigilante in New York, and you get a real sense what he's going to do when he doesn't come up with a description of the suspects, and it becomes pretty clear in the scene that he also has a gun, so that he's going to take these guys out, and so he doesn't really help the cops. The cops are a little frustrated, and I think that is the part that hooks in with the public. Yeah, he's going to do something about these guys that murdered his maid, and he's going to find his daughter himself. I think maybe that's the unrealistic piece, that you're going to help him because you want to find your daughter, but then ultimately she has also been murdered, and they find that out as well. Any more comments on this particular scene, Kevin?
No, I was just reading some of the comments. Lady V Elements, hi to you, and thank you for some of your appreciation for the way we did treat that actress on set, knowing the velocity of which we were coming at her. And it is important to recognize that ladies should be treated like ladies, and men, you got to stand up and open those doors and do the right thing. Be their hero. In today's society, it's not often seen that a man will open a door for somebody and say thank you when you receive that door opening. A lot of the chivalry has gone. There are a lot of us, though, that would come from our background and our influence with our fathers and grandfathers. We still carry those traditions forward. And that's a lot about why I'm doing Range Time with Rafterman, is to talk about these exercises that I was influenced by my father. And I think it is so important that we begin to respect each other. If not, we are going to burn down our communities. We have nothing but a spark coming our way, and it will ignite. So people, take appreciation for what you have, the blessings in your life, the love of your life, your girl, your wife. Make sure she's taken care of, and everything will be fine.
Well, I agree with that. And one of the things that drives me crazy, because it doesn't define men and women anymore, is that the term, where we use the term partner. So I want to say hello to my beautiful wife, who's upstairs listening to the show. Hello, Patricia. And I hate using that. I don't like when they use that term partner, and it seems to be thrust upon us. Yeah. There are men and women, and I'm married to a beautiful wife, and I'm happy about that, and I don't want to call her my partner. Yeah, you know.
And shout out to my beautiful wife, Tiffany, for who I rely so much on. She is literally the breath of me, and I thank you, dear Lord, for bringing this woman into my world. I am so lucky. And Deputy Mike knows Tiffany well, as to be able to probably second that. You know, she's truly a gem.
So, Mike, do you want to jump on this political correctness thing and say that you call your wife as well, or you call her a partner, right?
No, she's my wife. And
okay.
And being an attorney, she'll beat me up with words, so I have to be careful.
The only time my wife is my partner is when I'm playing a board game, which my son loves to do against my son and his fiance, right? Then she's my partner. But you know what? All the other times she's my wife.
Yeah.
Or your queen.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I don't want, So, well, actually, it's funny because when we were dating, I would say, "Ah, me lady," and she would say, "Oh, me lord." It's just kind of a joke that we had between each other. Now we're really going back, right? Talk about chivalry and virtue,
Right.
Doing that kind of stuff, right?
Wow.
We are kind of at the halfway mark. Martin, are we ready for a show, a commercial? You all set?
Yes, just give me.
There we go.
There's only one location on the internet where you can get it all. Movie, TV, and comic industry. News and rumor analysis. Official scoops from Geekosity magazine. Reviews and interviews. So, when you need it to be Sunday, there's only one place to go, mate. Pop Culture Minefield. Well, they're always talking nerd stuff. Right, jog on then.
Meet the Seattle Vigilante. Like so many comic heroes, this warrior hides his identity. But his identity isn't the only secret he has to keep. After grievous wounds received during combat, Tier 1 operator John Russell begins to recover and comes to terms with his new reality of being an amputee. And as he learns how to use his new prosthetic limb, he finds himself caught up in the bureaucratic red tape that too many wounded veterans experience, the exhausting medboard process. Out of sheer frustration, John takes it out on the criminal scum of the city. But when reality kicks in, John realizes he started something that's having an impact on the greater world around him, and thus has to reevaluate his motives. And moreover, just how far is John willing to go to finish this war he's declared against the criminals in Seattle? And will he even survive? From the creator of IDW's award-winning graphic novel Code Word Geronimo comes a new story about a different kind of warrior, Vindicated Inc., the first of its kind disabled veteran action hero comic. The Vindicated Inc. graphic novel crowdfunding campaign on fundmycomic.com is provided in the description of this video. We hope you become a contributor. Please share this link. Thank you.
Well, welcome back to Morning Coffee with the Chief. Please consider supporting Vindicated Inc. And Gerry's latest effort. Looks like it's going to be very interesting when he finally gets that done. And thank you to our guests for coming back. And we're going to speed up a little bit here. So let's do the punk genre scene. Now, you mentioned, Kevin, punk. And I have to tell you, when I moved to California, it was 1981. A couple of friends of mine from Michigan came out, and we were driving down Santa Monica Boulevard. We're trying to figure out how do we get to the west side, and we're all from Detroit. We don't know how to get there. And we ended up driving through West Hollywood, which is a complete culture shock for three guys from the Midwest. And there were all these punk rockers hanging out at Okie Dogs. Now Mike knows this location, right? And they're spilling into Santa Monica Boulevard, and they're trying to challenge us to a fight. Now, we weren't small guys, and we weren't afraid of mixing it up. We were from Detroit, for Christ's sakes, But these guys are spiked hairdos, black leather jackets. The only reason we didn't get out of the car is we got like, okay, this is something we haven't seen in. We're not in Dorothy, and we're not in Kansas anymore, Dorothy or Toto. So that's kind of like okay.
And what year was this?
It was 1981. So it would have been just before this.
Yep.
And we went a little further down, and there was a couple more of the punkers, and they were in a knife fight right at Laurel and Sunset. Mike, you remember there's a gas station there, I think, right?
Very much.
And I'm thinking, okay, and I didn't, well, West Hollywood, whatever, you know. We ended up finding, we were trying to get to Westwood. We ended up finding Westwood and hung out there for a while, and we went another way home. We didn't go back that way. And then a few years later, ended up being sent to West Hollywood to work at West Hollywood for many years. But yeah, so when I saw the punk genre and how you guys looked, I thought of that episode. It kind of faded by the time 83, 85, at least in Hollywood. It wasn't, I mean, in West Hollywood, because the hair bands came in too. We had all that stuff going on.
Yep.
And, but it was big at the time, right there in the 80s. I imagine it, you know, after Death Wish 2, it got embraced by other areas of the country, but it was already starting to transition a little bit in LA, in my opinion, based upon working on the streets. But so that was when I first saw that, you guys, and, you know, that's what I thought of was my experience in Los Angeles when I first got here in 1981. Did you draw inspiration from the punk scene?
I didn't. It wasn't that prevalent when we were doing this film. I had just come up with this idea, and then I began to see the roll-off from it. I began to see punk rockers becoming more of the Los Angeles terrain. And I ended up going over to Europe to do Full Metal Jacket about 3 years later. And the punk rockers over there were extraordinary. I mean, it was an art form. It wasn't so much a vigilante fear factor and hoodlums, even though they really come from that side of their thinking mentality. But in England, it was really a true amazing art form, worthwhile actually catching up with. Yeah.
So, Mike, were you ever part of a mosh pit at a punk rock concert? No? Yes, Mike?
I couldn't hear.
Were you ever part of a mosh pit at a punk rock concert?
No, you wouldn't find my dead body at a punk rock concert. Heavy metal and rock and roll is all there is. All there will ever be, and the blues, but not punk rock.
Not punk rock, yeah.
There was a nightclub in Hollywood Lawrence Fishburne took me to one night, and I think it was called Madame Tussauds, maybe, something like that. And
Madame
I first got it. What was it called?
Madame Wong's East.
There you go. And I remember seeing the drummer there that night, which is where I got this effect from with my head like this. The drummer took his drumsticks while he was drumming, and he hit his head like this. And the scream and the tongue wagging really came from, I was working as a waiter at a restaurant in Manhattan Beach, and I remember hearing this guy's appendix literally burst as he was cooking some omelet, and his scream and his tongue went into that fashion, so I adopted that as well. Yeah, it's extraordinary work on that film. It really was. And thank you, Michael Winter, for allowing me to be allowed to go play.
Yeah. Well, we realize, it gets back to the show, and we realize that Paul Kersey is going to, it's really not a vigilante show. It's I'm going to hunt and get revenge show is really what it is. Because even the first one, he kind of trolls the guys and they come after him. He's hunting the members of the gang here, right? And my next scene is he finds, right after the scene, we'll roll into it, he finds Stomper, right? So right after this scene, we'll roll into the next scene, Martine, and it's find Stomper. Now, it's funny when he does find you, so I think he's senior, when he does find you, Kevin, you got a cross on. Mm-hmm. So he's looking, so this is the punk look that I was talking about, right? But when he finds you got a cross on, why did you decide on the cross?
I don't know. And I don't recall, and I have to go back to my notes to find out why I adopted the cross. But I can't tell you right now without looking at my notes.
Okay. Well, it is interesting. And Mike has worked the county jails before, and there are hardened criminals, and they have crosses on their bodies, and they got the Mother of Guadalupe on their bodies. They claim to be very faithful guys, and they have this, this regalia of faith, but they're in for murder, right? Mike, it's kind of a dichotomy there. Mike, what do you think, Mike?
I did used to sit and talk with some of the inmates about the hypocrisy of it. I remember at night up at Wayside, they would have a Bible meeting before, going lights out, and then I knew what these guys were in for: murders and rape, drug dealers, and all of a sudden they got religion. But when they left, they seemed to have forgotten it back in their cell, and I always thought that was really strange, but it was just part of who they were.
So here we see that he finds you, Kevin, and now he's going to follow you into an abandoned building where you're doing a dope deal, and you got other people with you, and he decides to take you guys all on at the same time. And it was interesting because I also saw it was baggies of coke, little baggies of coke, which was consistent with if you were working the streets in the 80s. That's it was mostly baggies of coke and meth in Hollywood, and maybe you got some vials, little amber vials, but the baggies were actually pretty realistic, and you're exchanging with someone. So he's got an eye on you. What I want to go back and talk a little bit. What he did is he got an apartment in the area, and I just equate that to bring us back to Death Wish 1. He learned how to hunt from his dad. He was going on hunts in New York when he was taking these guys out, and now he's doing the same thing. I call setting up his apartment where in this area of LA where he's looking for you guys is setting up a deer blind, right? He's got his deer blind now. He's sitting in his deer blind. He's actually working around it, and now he's hunting. He's waiting to see you guys, and he's going to hunt, and he's going to take you guys out one at a time. It is unrealistic because LA is a sprawling metropolitan. How do you know where your guy's going to be at? It's just a big city, right? But hey, this is Hollywood, right? So we got to make it a little easier for Paul Kersey or Charles Bronson to find you guy. But he finds you. Here's you guys doing the dope deal, and there's checking out the little baggies of meth. The hats are interesting because I don't remember a lot of hats in Hollywood when I was working, and I don't remember these guys wearing a lot of hats like this. But the guys going to the leather bars, the gay clubs wear those hats, but that's the only time I remember these hats like this. No, I don't remember the bad guys. Because remember, a lot of these guys were using coke or cooked on heroin. They, if anything of value, they got rid of because they needed to maintain their habit. There you are. Of course, they conveniently put a light there so everybody can see.
Right? I have to say, working with Charles Bronson about himself, he's a real man's man. He's terrific, big charisma, obviously. And I just learned a story about him, which I thought was an interesting dichotomy to the way we perceive him. But he comes from a family that was not extraordinarily well with finances, and he had sisters, and the only clothes that they could have was hand-me-downs. So I found out that at 9 years old, Charles Bronson, working in the coal mines with his father, actually wore his sister's dress to work as the hand-me-down because they were that poverty-stricken. And to see this dichotomy of this man being who he became, as opposed to that moment in his life where he fell to the being a poverty victim, it's pretty interesting that he grew out of it the way he did.
I don't know if you got a chance to read the book, The Greatest Generation, and it's because it talks about the people who went through the Depression, then they fought in World War II, and if you look at a lot of the old Hollywood, I mean, Jimmy Stewart fought in the war, Charles Bronson fought in the war, Lee Marvin fought in the war. A lot of these guys went to World War II. They went to fight, and you call them a man's man. Well, you didn't have any choice. You had to be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You had to do those things because it was required of you by your family. It was required of the circumstances, and the nation required you to go. So that we didn't have any. Everybody's mobilized to do their part during the war, and everybody suffered to some degree. Maybe the ultra wealthy didn't during the Depression, but most people suffered, and that's one of the things why I have the super rich. I'm probably going to do a show on Alex Soros. I'll probably talk a little bit about him, and I just was checking his background out. So this is the son for George Soros. He took over his Open Society, and the man, I don't think the only sweat he's ever worked up is probably going to his hot yoga class. This is not a guy who's ever worked for a living, and yet he's helping to guide how society should be. And no dirt on the fingernail, maybe calluses from the gym, but certainly not from having to dig a ditch or anything like that. So I do appreciate a lot of guys like Charles, because I did hear that story about Charles Bronson, and he's not the only one. There's a lot of guys who came from humble means who became big stars, and but a lot of these really wealthy folks seem to want to tell us all how to live. I was a janitor in high school. We all had to work to go to Catholic high schools. We had to help pay for books and other things because we couldn't afford to go to Catholic schools otherwise. So everybody had to chip in. Everybody had to work. In fact, my Social Security credits go all the way back to when I was 14, because that's when I actually started getting a paycheck. So it makes it easier to relate to guys like Charles Bronson, somebody like me who's blue collar. Let's go on to so Stomper is killed. I'm sorry, we blew right past your death scene there, Stomper.
Right?
But Charles Bronson catches him, and what is the word he says? Do you believe in God?
Do you believe in Jesus?
Do you believe in Jesus?
Well, good, you're going to meet him.
Good, you're going to meet him. Well, actually, not really. If you understand the religious faith, you're probably not going to meet him. You're going to go the other direction. But it was a good line. There we go. We got. Do you believe in Jesus? Well, you're going to meet him. That's exactly right. And then the whole death scene where there's this movement and then boom, you go down. And I just want to clarify to folks, people don't die with the first round. They stand up. They keep fighting. They keep going. I was involved in a situation where a guy took a fatal round and he was still looking to fight the cops, still had a gun in hand. It was still looking for a target. And we had to take him on a second time a few seconds later, and where we finally took a headshot on the guy and took him out. So one round is TV going down.
Yep.
It's not real life. You're still in the fight. If you can still be in the fight, which is one round. But we do appreciate the acting effort on our Kevin in showing death, although not always as realistic as it is in the movie. In the movies, it's different because it fits the plot line, but it doesn't always happen in real life. Guys live for a long time after they've been shot sometimes. Yeah. Okay, let's get on to the next scene, and it's called The Rescue. And I have to actually see the scene because I got to remember it here now. Let's see. Consists with this is consistent with the first movie is what I said. And the thing about it is, so he's starting to kill somebody, but he's looking for people, right? And he ends up seeing some folks that are getting assaulted. And this is consistent with the first movie. As he's going out on the streets in New York, he's allowing himself to be targeted by the criminals, and he's reacting to their efforts to assault him and steal from him. But in this scene, he ends up rescuing a couple who are being robbed, and the woman is being sexually assaulted. And you can see they're at Hollywood and Western. In Hollywood Western at the time, it was pretty hopping. They had a lot of meth hypes, things like that. Mike, do you remember that era, that time in the 80s?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it hasn't improved too much either. Still an area, if you're looking for dope, that's where you're going to go. So, yeah.
I had a nephew who was going to the American Film Institute. And the parents called up and said, well, we're going to put him in East Hollywood. What do you think? I'm going to, I don't know. Tell him to give him my number. If he needs help, we'll come check it out. And I went and looked it out. And I said, well, as long as he's not hanging out at night, he'll be okay. But you get really busy when you go to the American Film Institute. I think that's what the place is called. Do you know what I'm talking about, Kevin?
AFI, yeah.
AFI, yeah. He graduated from the director's school there. Yep. And but they put him in East Hollywood, and I'm thinking, okay, well, he may be close to the school, but it's kind of a dicey area. But here he's going out on a hunt. He's looking for these guys, and he interrupts a rape and robbery that is happening. And the interesting thing about this scene is, just like the first movie, the victims refuse to give a description of who the vigilante is, who Charles Bronson is. I didn't see him. I don't know. I mean, the guy comes to our aid. Why would I want to help you catch him. And the other interesting thing about this is, I noticed this in the first movie, and I pointed out, and I got to point it out. He definitely makes sure that people are dead. He puts a second round in these guys. Did you notice that, Mike?
Yes, he has learned, and you gotta put a couple of rounds down. It was good that he got involved in this one, but I really applaud the victims as far as they gave a description. They just gave a really good, funny description.
Yeah.
And they were annoyed. It was like, hey, this guy saved us. Where were you?
And I forget the name of the actress here. I looked her up, and now I can't find her. I didn't write her name down, but I thought she did a great job. I mean, here is another scene where it's a sexual assault, and you don't really see it. All you see is her visually, but you don't really actually see the sexual assault. And I think one of the things that most people don't know about sexual assault is only 1 in 7 are generally reported. A lot of people don't report the sexual assaults. It's actually fairly low. And there's a lot of guilt and shame with being a sexual assault victim. And there's also a lot of PTSD that comes with it. Yeah, I went back to Hollywood as I became the DB lieutenant, and I jumped into that particular crime trying to figure out how do I reduce sexual assaults. And I learned a lot about the lack of reporting. If you have better reporting, of course, you get more leads, because it is a small pool of people that are doing these particularly stranger rapes or even acquaintance rapes. And you need leads, you need more reporting so that you can be successful in catching these guys. The other thing we weren't doing at the time, which they clarified or they cleaned up, is we weren't running the DNA of all these cases. If you run the DA, then you're able to link one case to another. So here's the husband. He's watching what's going on. Charles Bronson is getting involved. And but yeah, you weren't aware of that stat, Kevin? Only 1 in 7 is.
I did not know it was that. No, I didn't.
Yeah, it's if you think about it, women who are raped, they do go through this shame, and they also have, there's 2 different types of PTSD. There's chronic PTSD, which generally post-traumatic stress injuries, which cops will have, military will have if they're in long-term combat. And then there's post-traumatic stress injuries that are related to events, and women who are victims of rape are generally, they fit in that category. Maybe people are in a domestic violence situation, which is long-term. That could be more chronic post-traumatic injuries. So, but yeah, the whole shame that goes along with being a victim of this is a big reason why they don't report.
Wow.
Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, it's sad that it happens. In West Hollywood, sometimes the victims were a little bit more unique, but it wasn't reported no matter who the victim was very often. And it was hard to find it. I don't remember too many calls I went to for that specific crime versus all the other stuff that we got. We definitely did get a few, but it was
the big one was drug facilitated rape. Women either had too much or their drinks were tainted in the bars, and they were just picked off from the crowd by a predator. I when I was working there, I assumed there were a handful of guys working the strip, but I just couldn't get the support to do the robust investigations that I wanted to do. Nobody wants to be known as the rape city, right, or the rape capital, and I actually stepped in a little bit of a political quagmire pushing for it. So that's why I got invited to transfer. And I ended up at Transit and specializing in terrorism for a while, which I was really happy with as well. But yeah, rape is one of those underreported crimes. It certainly is. At the time, it was one of the crimes that we investigated at the station level that I felt was the most important crime that we had to investigate. And yet it was probably the least understood by the policymakers, and where I was working at the time, they really didn't want to talk about the level of rapes because it impacted the finances of the city. Mike worked there. I think you know what I'm talking about, Mike.
Right. Yeah, that was at the time the biggest contract the sheriff's department had, and nobody wanted to lose that or have any bad publicity with it.
Well, bars and restaurants make a lot of money, so do hotels. So the last thing they want is bad publicity, and they pay a lot of money into city coffers, and the last thing they want is bad publicity. I didn't really care about bad publicity. I just wanted to catch bad guys, but, hey, whatever. They transferred me, They said, hey, where do you want to go, Lenox or West Hollywood? I mean, to Transit.
services.
And Lennox was more what I've done before, and Transit was different. And we had 9/11, and I figured if we were going to get hit for terrorism, it would be on the transit system. So I wanted to go there, and I ended up getting deeply into the anti-terrorism stuff. I loved it. It was great. I flew all over the country and actually around the world doing that kind of stuff for several years. And we were identified as possible targets, but to my knowledge, we never had a terrorist hit us. But it was definitely, I was glad to go there. It was a lot of fun. I did a show on this platform. It was Dirty Bomb. It was about a dirty bomb exploding in London. And I brought a couple of my friends who were anti-terrorism experts on, and we analyzed how we respond to a dirty bomb. So it was fun going, here. Kevin, I have this wide range of experience, I'm
sitting back and I'm seeing this insight, which is extraordinary insight. Thank you, gentlemen, for bringing this to light. But I'm also thinking, how is it that we can keep up with all the bad guys around the world at the velocity they're chasing us down with this thing in hand? How are we keeping up at all? And to hear your history and career, this was happening back when you were doing your business.
I got a show coming up, and we're going to talk about the threats to the U.S. What are the real threats? And the whole terrorism thing's been politicized, unfortunately. I won't get into that because I could spend an hour talking about it. But the capacity that we had after 9/11, we don't necessarily have in terms of protecting critical infrastructure and our nation, and that's sad. But that's one of the reasons why I want to do a show. And there are some threats, as we saw with Hamas, that we're not really addressing in the U.S. at the time. But this isn't the platform for that. But let's get into New York. New York City keeps tabs. Now, what happens is the detectives are, and at the time we didn't have, we would have only known this by reading the paper, right? Because we didn't have these connections with police departments around the country. So they had a vigilante case in New York, and some detective says, wasn't there some vigilante case in, Boston or some? Oh, no, it was in New York. They're just talking about it in the office. And the only way we'd really know about that, I mean, we had teletypes and other things, but for the most part, there wasn't this communication between like New York and Los Angeles. It wasn't regular. It wasn't consistent. And we probably would not have known about the vigilante in New York, except through news reports. And they remembered it, and they called New York. Now, just to clarify for our audience, New York's method for handling Paul Kersey was to just encourage him to leave. They didn't want to make a martyr of him. They didn't want to put him on trial. They liked the fact that as a vigilante, he had managed to lower the cities because the criminals were afraid. That was one of the big themes of the movie. And their way of handling it was, you got to get out of town by sundown, right? That was one of the scenes in Death Wish 1. And New York finds out, we let him go. We know who he was. We had the evidence. We let him go, and now he's doing it again in Los Angeles. And so they're a little worried about it, right? And so this is where the plot kind of goes off the rails, Kevin. But sometimes you got to do that to make it interesting, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Mike, am I right? We don't always we don't really know what's going on in New York and Boston half the time. There wasn't those kind of connections back in the 80s.
Back then, yeah, you wouldn't have known that. And today, with even on your smartphone, you can look up all this stuff and it pops up right away. But these guys were looking at vicarious liability, and they were just trying to cover their butt. And
okay, now you got to explain. You got to explain that term, vicarious liability. Our audience won't know what the hell you're talking about.
As an example, if you pulled someone over that was drunk driving, and you feel, hey, I'm going to let this guy go, and he drives down the street and he gets in a car crash and hurts somebody, the department and probably the officer himself is going to be held for vicarious liability because they should have taken care of it the first time. And because they didn't, it actually caused the next problem. And that's a big no-no.
Wow.
So
in here, our character Vince's, I think it's Gardena.
Yep, Vincent Gardena.
Yeah, and he's kind of sent to L.A. We'll go shut him. It's implied, go kill him is what it's implied. But anyways, go to L.A. and deal with this problem is what is told to him. And he's a good soldier. He's going to go there. He's not going to, of course, kill anybody, but he's not going to kill James Bronson or Paul Kersey, but he's going to try and stop it at least. And he goes to L.A. and he meets with the L.A. guys. But here's this scene is the meeting in either the mayor and the DA's office, I think it was, or maybe it was the DA's office and Chief of Police's office, who were the people who knew at the time about the vigilante. And yeah, it's the commissioner's office, so the police commissioner's office. And Martine, we could just go ahead and roll right into the next scene. Found them after this. So Vincent Gardena is going to go. He's the detective lieutenant. He's going to go to L.A. and he's going to meet with the LAPD officers, and he's not going to give them anything. And then he's going to look for Paul Kersey. I don't know how the heck he finds Paul Kersey, and that's right. He hires somebody to look for him. I think he has a friend in LA who's doing some legwork for him to find out about Paul Kersey and where he's at. And he ends up following him. Here's our bad guys again. That's not Lawrence Fishburne. Is that him? It is. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't quite look like him. But they're hanging out, and our hero finds them. There's Nirvana. Do you know who he is, Kevin?
Thomas Duffy.
Yeah, I looked him up. He was in Jurassic Park. He was the guy with the big beard.
Yep.
And I kind of remembered him in a scene in Jurassic Park, and I think it was him as they're running away from the dinosaurs. Their camp has been destroyed, and he comes up onto the tall grass. I think it was him, and he was thinking, "Don't go in the tall grass," but they're chasing him. He runs in the tall grass, and the raptors all get him, right? Because the raptors are waiting in the tall grass. They're being chased. They're being hunted by the raptors. But yeah, and he's been in some other. He had a pretty good acting career.
He did. And I actually loved him in this film. I mean, there was that scene where he's throwing the police all over the hoods of cars, and he looks like he's on crack, meth, or whatever that. What was it called? The
PCP.
PCP. Yeah. So he played it very well.
And so here we got Charles Bronson finds them, and he's going to follow them, and he takes a couple of them out here, but Nirvana, that's his name, Nirvana. He ends up getting away, right? And that becomes his pursuit. But he ends up shooting. I think Lawrence Fishburne is the one with he has the boom box in front of his face, and he gets shot through the boom box, which. I remember at the time I go, I don't know, would the bullet go through that? When I first saw the movie, that's what I thought. Okay, and I didn't, of course, at the time I didn't realize it was the great Lawrence Fishburne. But then, as we watch the show, he gets there. Here's our police detective. He's following him now. He's following where he's going, and this is before they have the big shootout. But it's interesting. I looked up the cabbie. He's actually on Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter, and I thought, God, I should send him a note to come on. He's like 80. I checked him out. He's 80. I forget his name. Moss, I think his name is something Moss. And but I go, he doesn't know me. That wouldn't be right. But he follows him on the bus, and they get off the bus, and they're going to do a deal for guns. And of course, there's a theme in here. They keep harassing the ladies. They're harassing the nurse.
Yeah.
And but our police detective, our lieutenant, is using the taxi cab to follow him around, and it's great. I don't know if you guys saw the scene. So he's, "Hey, this is police business," and the guy said, "It doesn't work here in LA. You got to pay." So then he gives him money, and I've done it several New York shows, and I can imagine them flashing the tin and saying, "No, this is police business," and go. And so we got a comment, "Death wish sounds like me having lunch with my ex." Okay, all right, thank you for that comment. Well, you got to keep your personal life out of this, or is it just a theme, or is it just sexism? No, I think part of building the belief of threat to the community was talking about the sexual crimes or rapes and sexual assaults that were going on at the time. Because, I used the stat, and it was a 14.1 homicides per 100,000 in California in 1980, and then it was 1993 was 13.1. So in that period, crime was very high, and violent crime, the stats were consistent with that high crime. If you go to 2014, we're at 4.4 murders per 100,000. So you see that dramatic drop in murders, and there was a corresponding drop in violent crime, which is why I think people got sleepy, and then we embraced all these criminal justice reforms, and now crime is going up again. Instead of modifying the criminal justice system that exists today and just kind of pruning the tree of criminal justice so we get better blooms, we cut it down, and now we're struggling, right? Which is a mistake. But Charles Bronson ends up getting in a shooting, and the police detective realizes Bronson might get shot, and he ends up, he's still in the cab. He ends up going down there, and he helps him out in the shooting. He ends up saving Bronson's life. And it's interesting, as the scene closes out, he goes to check the detective out, and the detective just says, "Go get him." You know, you could tell in the first movie and this movie, he likes Paul Kersey, or he likes what he's doing. He's handcuffed as a cop. There's only so many things he can do. And he also appreciates it. He understands it, right? Your family's been victimized, and you're doing what you can to take care of them, right, Mike? If your family was assaulted, you'd want to break some rules together. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the strength of this movie. That's why it captures the attention of so many people. Same for you, Kevin. I mean, if you're in a situation when your family's threatened, you're going to step up and do something. That's part of the whole masculine old-time guy, Charles Bronson, Clint Eastwood, but mostly the masculine men from our era as well. There were expectations for being men.
You take care of family first and foremost. You do the business that you need to do.
Yeah, it's
Kevin,
tough,
if you contact me, make sure you use the burner phone and don't text anything. I'll be there.
Make sure you use the burner phone. You know, it's funny. I was watching a YouTube thing, and this lady got all mad because some guy was harassing her on the train. She was mad that nobody came to her defense. And as I watched it, all I could think of is, okay, you know, when you go into the public sphere, because we have more women in the public sphere because they're working. You know, if you're a guy, what do? You retreat first, right? And then if the guy pursues you, then you square up and you're ready, right? Instead, she stayed there and let her harass him. Instead of retreating back to where there were a bunch of guys, she stayed there and said, "Why don't you come and save me?" And I'm thinking, you know, for women, keep in mind, if you want somebody to be chivalrous, you have to actually use some common sense too, and try to retreat first. Try to go to a place where it's safe. And if the guy pursues you, because many times they won't, you know, because if you think about it, if you get into a situation on a subway platform or a bus, you decide to help some lady out. Here's what you risk. You risk being arrested, like Daniel Penny, right? In New York, this is the guy on the subway. You will risk being criminally prosecuted and civilly ended up in civil court, right? But you also risk being hurt yourself. So for a guy, those are the things that we're asking guys to do. So we're asking our ladies to do is try not to put them in the situation by being just smart, you know, about what's going on. That's what I felt about that. I don't know if you want to comment on that, Mike. I just think that people need to be a little smart when they're out in the public sphere.
Yeah, especially now, you got to be very careful. Everything's filmed, everything is scrutinized, and someone twists it around. And look, again, if it's family, you got to take care of business, but you don't want to see someone else just get messed around with either. You just have to be careful what you do.
Right. So here we are where they're still doing their deal. This was kind of a long scene. Let's see, what do we got? And the police detective gets involved, and there they are. He's watching the crime. Now, there's somebody in the tree. This was also unrealistic. I mean, they're doing a deal, right? But they got a sniper on the high ground in a tree. Now, I can understand maybe some guys standing around a lookout because, you know, you have lookouts when you're committing crimes, but they're not up in a tree with a rifle. That's pretty unrealistic for a street a trade like this that's going down here. That's pretty unrealistic. But here's Charles Bronson shooting out these guys. I think he's going to take out Lawrence Fishburne here pretty soon. And I think by this time the cop is either already been shot or he's about to be shot. But in this scene, he ends up taking out, I think, 2 or 3 of the guys, but one guy, Nirvana, manages to get away. And then the firepower they had at the time, This was about the time that we started having AK-47s and automatics entering the streets. And at the time, both Mike and I don't know, did you start with you started with a 6-shooter, right, Mike?
Absolutely. 686.
Yeah. And so Bronson has an automatic here. Our police detective has a little 5-shot chief, which is, what the hell are you getting in a shooting with a 5? Well, you shoot, Kevin, right? I mean, a little 2-inch, and you're shooting at somebody 50 yards away. That's not what you want to go into a gunfight with, right?
Yeah.
So here's our police detective. He's dying, but they did show the firepower that was starting to hit the streets. And it really took off in the mid-'80s with the crack epidemic. We had a lot of AK-47s out there on the streets. There was an incredible amount of violence that hit the streets with cocaine. I wouldn't say that we saw a ton of AK-47s in Hollywood, but they were definitely out there on the streets. If you were in the drug trade, it was likely that you had that kind of firepower. The other thing is 9mm were all, and semi-automatic, just the dope dealers. The first people that actually tried to kill me was in 1985. Were two white dope dealers. I pulled them over on DeLongpre, Mike. I don't know if I ever told you the story. I was on training, and my training officer said, "Okay, I want to see how you approach the car." I was in the passenger seat, and I was the bookman, and I thought, I'm not going to cross over to the driver's side. I'll just approach from the passenger side, which threw these guys off. And when at nighttime, so it was at night, we were a little offset, and the lights were focused on the car. And what the lights give you, Kevin, is they give you a cone of concealment. Because if you stay out of the beam of light, they can't see you, right? And this is stuff we're all taught, right? And so I approach the car, but I stay out of that beam of light so they can't see where I'm coming from. And both of the guys, there are two guys in front seat. It was a Datsun B210. When somebody tries to kill you, you tend to remember a lot of detail. And so they're in a Datsun B210, small car. A couple of white guys are all sucked up because they were, using their product as well. And they were both looking intently out the driver's door window. And I thought, well, that is pretty odd. What, because usually when you pull people over, they're just kind of looking forward, or maybe they're going to be nervous, but they're looking forward, or they're bouncing around. Maybe they'll look back at you. But these guys are looking intently out the driver's door. And I go, okay, there's something wrong here. And I just pull my gun out, hit them with my flashlight, so they knew I wasn't coming up on the driver's side. And I said, let me see your hands. And then I hear a thunk, boom. It was a Browning automatic. They were waiting for me to come through the driver's door window.
Wow.
And if I'd have come through the driver's door window, they were going to light me up. They had an 8-ball of coke in the back. So they were dope dealers, and they were stupid enough to think they were going to get away with it. And fortunately for me, I followed my training, and I happened to throw them off. Most of our cars were one-man cars at the time, but I threw them off, and I walked up on the passenger side, and there was no way they could wheel around to do any kind of acquisition target on me at the time. I had the drop on them, and they knew it, so they gave it up. But yeah, that was the first time somebody tried to kill me.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, oh, that's just Wednesday. No big deal.
Wow.
I think I was 25, and it was like, okay, well, hey, whatever.
I want to just applaud you both for what you've chosen as careers, and for the audience at large. Give these gentlemen high kudos, big respect. The fact that you're willing to face off with your own mortality, 99% of the time you're called to that conquest, and the fact that you walk away and you've defended our community. Just thank you from the bottom of my heart. My family thanks you, and wow, tremendous.
Well, thank you so much, Kevin. It is Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. You don't know what your neighborhood cop has been through as I tell that story. I don't think Mike has ever heard that story. Somebody did ask me if I ever shot anybody. No, I always seemed to have the drop on the guy I was dealing with, or they were already engaged with another deputy who took them out shortly before I got there. So thankfully, I did not have to shoot anybody. But I also was very, I followed my tactics. And as I trained folks, there's a reason why we use these tactics. Tactics are usually developed based upon, I don't want to say the failures, but the tragedies of police officers or soldiers who dealt with those situations and gave their lives. You evaluate those situations and you develop tactics to survive. And so I always believed in following the tactics. I wouldn't say I was the best tactician out there, but what I knew, I followed, and that helped save my life. I don't know, Mike, if you want to comment on that, but that's how I saw the world.
Our training with this was very good, and when you got to patrol and you had a specific training officer, it was even more enhanced. Command presence is something. It's a tool on the belt that people don't understand very well in the public, but if your command presence is so strong that they don't bother pulling that gun, or they think twice. Did I ever have to shoot anybody? No. Did I have to draw my weapon? Constantly. Doesn't mean I was pointing at them, but it was out and it was ready, and I was using all the tactics and tricks that we've learned. But my command presence was able to overcome a ton of stuff, and I was in a lot of scenes or a lot of scenarios with the other guy having a gun.
Yeah.
So
one of those scenarios, Deputy Mike Ascolese, was outside the Van Nuys court, and you had to defend the citizenry standing by. You pulled your gun and you downed a gentleman who had a firearm who was blasting away at some civilian.
Yeah, he was. He actually had two guns, which was kept secret, and he was blasting an attorney. And I wasn't quite sure if that was a crime, but it turned out it really was.
It was family court, I bet. So
it actually was probate court.
Probate
court. He shot his sister's probate attorney. Yeah, that thing went worldwide. That was crazy. Yeah. That was right during the trial with Beretta with Robert Blake.
Yeah. I remember that shooting, Mike. It was, of course, it hit the TV, and then you hear about it because it's our department that is on it. And go ahead and hey, Martine, go ahead and roll the scene, Nirvana, and because we got to catch up here. But so they do identify who Nirvana is, and they do this tactical operation. They're going to try and take him down, but Paul Kersey manages he gets a radio to be able to monitor the police radio, and he realizes what's going on, and he decides he's going to go after Nirvana before the police get there. But ultimately, they end up capturing Nirvana, and this does lead to the fight scene that you talked about, Kevin, where he's the actor's. I forget his name now. I got his name on the other page. Thomas Duffy. He's throwing the guys around, and he's a decent sized guy. Yeah, I mean, he looks big in the movie. Is he a big guy?
Yeah, he is. He's not small.
And he's throwing the cops around, and I was thinking, okay, it ain't gonna happen with me. I'm gonna be putting this guy down, but it is the movie, right? And one of the other things about that scene, though, and Mike, is the old style taser. Did you see it?
Yes, very much.
You see that old
like
style taser? Yeah, it's got the 2-prong one. Only the sergeant had them, and they were not accurate. And the tasers are way better today than we have today. They've developed. But I remember when I first started, the tasers were these kind of boxy looking things, almost kind of like the phaser looking thing out of Star Trek, right? That was more of a shape like that and not really shaped like a taser gun, right?
Right.
And it doesn't take them down. And the other thing I recognized is as soon as I saw him, like, okay, they're trying to replicate that he's on PCP, and they do eventually talk about that. And I will say, when I was in the academy, we did these ride-alongs. So when I joined, they swore you right in. You came in, you're sworn in, so you're automatically deputy sheriff. They changed that to where now you had to get through the academy. So when we went out on patrol rides when we were in the academy, we were full-fledged deputy sheriff. So you just rode with a partner. And they sent me down to Lenox, and the guy asked me, well, what do you want to see? I go, well, I've never seen anybody on PCP. Oh, we'll see that tonight. We'll see that tonight. And sure enough, this guy, I forget what street it was on, but we're down in Lenox, South LA, and we get a call of what they called a duster at the time. That was the phrase. And we go, and this guy's walking down in the middle straight, completely naked, because what PCP does is it heats your body up, and so they strip their clothes off. And the other thing is, it's to some degree, it's a pain reliever, right? So you don't feel pain, and it makes your muscles more rigid and more prone to fight because you're not thinking cognitively. Your cognitive thinking degrades as well. And 4 of us struggled to take this guy into custody. Now, at the time, I was probably 180, but I could bench press 300 pounds. I was a really strong guy, and I was just struggling just to get the guy's arm behind his back. And there was 4 of us doing this, and one of my friends in the academy, he was also there, and he was a decent-sized guy too, and we struggled to get this guy in custody. So the angel dust I don't know if it necessarily makes you strong, but it certainly pain doesn't. You don't feel things, which means if you feel pain, you kind of recoil, right? If you don't feel pain, you still go forward, right? I think that's really where the strength comes from, or the perception of strength comes from, and that's what was going on in that scene. So I just wanted to flesh out with some level of expertise, Kevin, your comment that he was on PCP.
Very good, thank you.
No problem. If our audience, you got a lesson, right? Here we from the chief. Mike, you want to comment? Did you face anybody with PCP in Hollywood?
Yeah, Detroit and just north of Santa Monica behind that McDonald's. And not only was he tough to get, once we cuffed him, he broke my cuffs. That was $26 out of my pocket. But
so these are steel cuffs, right? Yeah.
Stunned at how strong the guy was. And there was a bunch of us. And he was throwing us around. It took a lot to put him down.
So what did they call the marijuana cigarettes dipped in PCP? They call them Cools?
Sherms.
Was it Sherms? Okay.
Sherms. Sherman cigarettes.
Sherman cigarettes, and there were, the street name. So we call them Dusters. The street name for PCP was Angel Dust, right? I'm getting it right, Mike? And so we had Sherms, right? So I don't know where we came from. Why Sherms? I don't remember that.
Because
and
they were dipped in what used to be called Sherman cigarettes. So it was just called the Sherman.
Oh, okay. Because they would dip cigarettes in them too. So
Right.
you can get a cigarette dipped in PCP. You can get a marijuana dipped in PCP. And we did used to call the chronic users Sherm heads, and if chronic use, I think cause permanent damage. That's why I'm so concerned about what's going on with marijuana and the chronic use of it, where it's not really for medical, they're just using it. I think 20 years from now, we're going to have some problems with that. But here he is, he's fighting the cops, and he's taken on the LAPD all by himself. He got away from Paul Kersey, and I think he actually did manage to stab Paul in this scene too. So Paul misses his opportunity, and the rest of the movie, and we're going to get into him, is his effort to take out Nirvana. And it's this time that Jill Ireland also is becoming aware that he was the vigilante in New York, or could potentially be, and they're supposed to get married. She's having conflict with him because he's denying it, but in reality, he's out at his deer blind hunting the guys that killed his daughter and killed the maid, right? That's his single-minded focus on this. So here's the scene where he's fighting all the cops. What'd you say, Kevin? He's what, 6'2", 6'3"?
I'm going to guess somewhere probably around 6'1", maybe.
Okay.
But he was stocky, very, very solid. He was well cast in this.
Yeah. Let's see. I don't know about you, but I don't want nutty psychotics in my brain. Yeah. I don't understand people. I mean, I can understand. Since I drink, it's really hard for me to be hypocritical this way, but drinking flushes out of your system. Chronic use, of course, has long-term damage. And I think if you look at drinking, we looked at the other accepted drug in our society, nicotine, they have these negative impacts. Why do we want to embrace other mind-altering drugs and legalize them? I think that just has an impact on us as a people and as a society. I don't know if you guys want to comment on that. That's just me. That's my other show coming out, right?
I want to say something here at this point. You brought up something earlier about men, go see your doctors, get a physical. Accidentally, I was complaining about something going on in my body recently, and we took an x-ray, and the doctor phoned me up about 3 weeks later and went, "Whoops, you're in a lot of trouble, dude. I'm not going to talk to you about what that trouble is at this moment, but it's going to get corrected. Coming next Tuesday, I go into surgery. I'm an inpatient and then an outpatient." But it goes back to what you said. Take care of yourselves. You never know when. We all afforded the price to live on this great planet, but you need to pay attention to what your body is telling you. Trust your instincts, and that's all I'm going to say about that. But smoking was my drug of choice, so to speak. My mother was a heavy, heavy smoker. When I was in her room, 2 years old, I had my first drag of a cigarette. I saw one burning in an ashtray, and I became a smoker hardcore at 11 years old. And that's the price I'm paying for now. I feel really great health-wise, but smoking catches up, kids. So listen to the chief. And
that sounds like a new show. Listen to the chief.
Listen to the chief.
I'm glad you said that, and thank you for sharing. I just as we get older, you realize your time on this earth is limited, and you think, God, I wish I wouldn't. I wish I'd, whatever.
Yep.
And I, smoking was a big part of my family too. I never got into it, thankfully, right? And I don't drink too much, but at least go get checked out on a regular basis. Most people have health insurance. Use it. There's a reason why it's there. But the next scene, the car, I knew I had two car guys coming on. So I really only showed this scene because I have two car guys coming on, and I wanted you to see it. So let's bring it up, Martine. And this is the car that the beautiful Jill Ireland is driving.
1966.
Okay.
Corvette Stingray C2.
Did I not include that scene, Martine?
Yes, but I think I may have
forgot it.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry, but however, we are short on time, and I would like more to show the final scene. That
go ahead and show the final scene, but go ahead and finish. Go ahead and do the final scene, and we'll talk a little bit as the final scene shows. Okay. So, what year car was that, Mike?
1966 Stingray C2.
I was wondering if that's actually Bronson's car that they used in the show,
right?
Because it was a beautiful car.
What is that thing worth today, Mike?
Just a little bit more than my ex's attorney made.
Yeah, right. 50, 60, 70,000, something like that. So this last scene is he plays the doctor, and he goes after Nirvana, who's now been placed in a mental hospital. And at court, they came up with all these reasons why, because of drug use, he had to go to the mental hospital. It was kind of an unrealistic scene, and they don't actually take people who are dealing with have drugs on board into mental hospitals, as Mike and I both know. But now he's got to find his way into this hospital. His girlfriend has some connection. He ends up going to visit. He steals an ID, and he makes his own ID, and he goes to the hospital, and he's going to take out this guy by himself. Now, the interesting thing about this is Charles Bronson's got a reputation of being a tough guy, but he's in his 60s now.
He was 61 in this movie.
61, so he's my age, right? So he's and you can actually see it. I mean, 8 years later, after Death Wish 1 and now Death Wish 2, you can see that he's definitely older, right? And you can see age is catching up on him. But he ends up in a fight with our actor David Thomas, I think
Thomas Duffy.
Thomas Duffy. I'm sorry. Yeah, I got to remember. I don't know why I can't remember Duffy. That was a friend of mine, nice Irish name, and a friend of mine's last name was Duffy. But he ends up in a fight with this guy, and he manages to survive. But he finally gets all the members of the crew, so he's got a single-minded focus. This is like wounding the deer, and you're going to pursue him until you actually get your deer, right? Or wounded. In this case, it'd be more like wounding a lion or a tiger. These are predators, and you're going to take out this predator, and you're going to do whatever it takes. Any comments on the scene, Kevin?
No, I don't have much I can say at this point. I just, I'm watching this, and it's been years since I've ever seen the film, but it's nice to be refreshed by the memories of the film itself, seeing Mr. Bronson doing his good work, and seeing the interaction of the script as well. It's really well thought out.
Yes. Yeah. Hey, Mike, what do you think of the scene? Charles is getting a little old there.
Yeah, but that doesn't really come out so much on this. I like the actor he's with, Charles Cypher. He's been in everything I've seen for years and years and years. He's a good actor, and so it was interesting that he gave him the head start to Split.
Yes.
Because he understood right away. First of all, he recognized who he was and why he was there, and he got it. Family's family, and he gave him the time to Split, and he used it.
Yeah, after the fight, and he ends up and it's an interesting way he kills the guy. The guy actually punches something and ends up in some kind of machine that has a lot of electricity, I guess, that runs through it, and he hit the switch and it killed Thomas Duffy. But yeah, you're right. This actor right here, he comes in, he sees that he's wounded, and all Charles Bronson says, he killed my. I think he said he killed my maid. He killed my daughter. I think is what he said. He killed my daughter. Killed my family.
Yes, Thomas.
And that's when he says, okay, I'll give you 3 minutes. And it's interesting. He also says the code to get out. He says, "Do you know the code?" Yeah. And Charles Bronson says the code. So he's paying attention to what's going on, Charles Bronson. So he's planned. I do like that. He was a conscientious objector in the first movie, and then he becomes the vigilante. They don't really make any qualms about the fact he's nonviolent. All that's gone, and he's hunting these guys that killed his daughter and his maid. And he's not going to be denied, and he's okay with the consequences. I'll stay here. I'll take the go ahead.
The machine he used was what they used for shocking the brain, and he says, they've stopped using it because the politics have changed, and yet when the guy smashes it, and he turns on electricity. It was rather shocking for him. So,
yeah, it's hard.
I want to throw 2 cents here at this for a moment. One of the highlights when we got cast in the film, we heard that Jimmy Page was going to be doing the music. And what a tremendous, tremendous high that was for me specifically, because I grew up with a guitar player down the street who was so talented at 14 years old, but he used to play Jimmy Page's stuff for me and to show off. And then Mike and I talked about Jimmy Page the other day. So Mike, you want to take it from here about Jimmy, and you go ahead.
This was the first thing Jimmy Page did after John Bonham from Led Zeppelin died, the drummer. And it turns out his next door neighbor was the one that was part of this movie and approached him. It literally went next door and talked to him. And it's also the only Jimi Hendrix music that came out on Swan Song Records. Swan Song was owned by Led Zeppelin. It was their own record company. Very few artists were on it. It was Led Zeppelin and Bad Company. To get this album now, it costs hundreds of dollars if you can find an original pressing. It was a limited release, and people who are music fans, especially Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin fans, very hard time to find it. I do happen to know there's one hiding at Kevin's house. I do know that.
So, when you say the album, you mean the soundtrack from the movie, the music on it?
Yeah.
So,
yes, all the music on it was done by Jimmy, including the vocals. He played multiple instruments on it. There are a couple other people that helped him out, but in 80% of it was all Jimmy.
You also mentioned Jimi Hendrix. Was that a slip, or was it all Jimmy Page?
It was all Jimmy Page. That was a Freudian slip. What can I tell you?
Yeah, it was.
But going with that Freudian slip, I want to tell you, I took my wife back to Vancouver, Canada, where I grew up, to my high school. I walked in after doing Full Metal Jacket and becoming known, and I walked up to a teacher there, and I said, "I used to go to this high school. I'm probably the most famous student you've ever had here." And he said, "Yeah, who are you?" Then he said, well, after he learned that I did Full Metal Jacket, he said, "Well, you're actually the second most famous. Jimi Hendrix is the first."
Oh, there we go.
Oh, wow. And I used to have Sunday dinners. My father was a vocalist pianist, very well known throughout Canada. But Cab Calloway's lead singer on Broadway at the age of 18, some of his history. But we used to have Sunday dinners with Grandma Hendrix. And so I grew up in that flavor. And so now that we mentioned the slip up, that's my 2 cents of that.
Well, what did Jimi Hendrix move over Rover, let Jimmy take over? So I guess it needs to be move over Kevin, let Jimmy take over, right? I think he said that on one of his albums, right? Jimi Hendrix. I used to listen to him. My daughter played Purple Haze at a little band she was in for a while, a jazz band for a little before she gave up playing bass. We're at the end of our show, guys. I want to thank you so much for coming on yet again. I hope you had a good time with the show, Kevin.
Oh, yeah.
I certainly did. And Chief, just thank you so much for the privilege of being a part of this, to be a part of this on Law Enforcement Appreciation Day, Tuesday, January 9th. And for all those who see a hero in uniform, you're standing in a Starbucks, push them up to the front of the line, buy their coffee, give them a standing ovation. Just the least we can do for the heroes that you have become in our worlds.
Mike, thank you for coming on the show. I will consider signing you off training soon. So if you keep coming back, we'll and
I get my letter.
You'll get your letter that yes, that you are full certified police officer. Yes, thank you so much, Kevin, for your comments, and good luck with your procedure coming up. And yes, please listen to the chief. Go get checked out and make sure you go into your annual physical. Martine, I think we are ready, and you guys stick around for a debrief. Martin, you can take it away.